Welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about the Emperor. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. So for announcements today, I have right now that the best way to support the podcast is to check out my new Patreon. Supporting me there will give you access to upcoming podcast episode topics early, digital downloads I've created, and monthly tarot hangouts. Link will be in the show notes to check that out. And you can always go to my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot for all information about the podcast. All right, so into our main discussion. So again, this is season 2 of the podcast. In the first season, I introduced tarot through talking about oracle versus tarot cards, myths of tarot, how to find a deck, reading for yourself versus others, and much more. In season 2, we're going through the first 13 cards of the major arcana, one per episode. And today I'm talking about the Emperor. So the number associated with this card in the major arcana is 4. The emperor is usually depicted as a father figure, man, often seated on a throne of some sort. For some of the tarot decks I have in the Goddess of Love tarot deck, the emperor is changed to the name the Sovereign, which I kind of love. The goddess depicted on this card is Vesta. She's shown holding a rose and a candle. She has a halo around her head. She also has like a red and gold throne-like chair behind her that she stands in front of. And at her feet are flames of red and orange and yellow that encompass the entire bottom of the card. In the Anima Mundi deck I have, the Emperor is depicted as a Douglas fir tree. In the Pacific Northwest, where I live, I love the idea of the Emperor as a Douglas fir because I see them around all the time and they're huge trees. If you've never seen one in the wild, they can get up to 300 feet tall and 18 feet wide, which is about 90 meters tall and 5.5 meters wide for those outside the US. So there are actually a few Douglas firs left in my town, and they truly just tower above everything else, above buildings, all the houses, and most other trees. So for this card for the Emperor, when we get into the meanings part, I feel like the Emperor gives healthy daddy energy. Like I said in the Anima Mundi deck, the Douglas fir seems to be kind of a perfect match for this. It's powerful, it towers above most other trees, usually often by like 3 times the height in buildings, to be honest. It's a father figure, this sort of like stern, but also wise and level-headed. In the deck description for this card, it says, having weathered many years, he has a solid foundation and is able to provide for others. And this card reflects strong ambitions and confidence. It's about dreaming big and making it happen. Why wouldn't everything you dream of come true? I think of this card as about structure and establishing a foundation. Think of a tree creating deep roots into the ground so it can hold up a 300-foot tree above it, right? How deep and wide must its roots grow in order to support that tall of a tree above the ground? From the guidebook of the Goddess of Love tarot, I'm going to read a quote. It says, one of the most sacred visions of the Goddess of Love is the invitation to step fully into our heart's power, not as an act of control or dominance over another, but in sovereignty and commitment to the self. Again, like I said, this is kind of a healthy version of daddy energy or paternal influence, in my opinion. So it's not like dominating or authoritarian necessarily, but it provides a structure by which to grow and flourish. So another quote from for this card from the Goddess of Love tarot deck is, the Emperor transforms into she who internalizes her power. So my belief is that you don't need to worship outside forces or beings. First, worship yourself and set yourself up for success with structure and routine, which you can expand within. Again, in the Goddess of Love tarot deck, the Emperor is renamed to the Sovereign, and this depiction of the Sovereign as Emperor emphasizes how the Sovereign is a virgin, but not virgin in kind of the way that purity culture often depicts it, but virgin as in sexually independent, not reliant on anything or anyone else for their own pleasure. And sovereignty makes me think about this card differently, to be honest. In the Rider Waite-Smith depiction, the card gives very masculine energy. They even use the words authoritarian, I feel like. And sometimes that can be like challenging to work with, especially if you have trauma around folks or figures that sort of embody that energy. In the Goddess of Love tarot deck, this card is depicted as the goddess Vesta, and Vesta is the goddess of love, the Roman goddess of the hearth, home, devotion, and dedication. And for me, when I think about sovereign parts of myself, I think of like how I can honor that in my hearth and home. And it really makes me think of embracing like personal style of decor and creating structure for myself without being authoritarian about it. How do I lovingly hold my own boundaries and center my needs? Um, so another quote from the Goddess of Love tarot deck um, description for this card is whose Vestal virgins guarded her eternal flame. Vesta represents sexuality turned inward into autonomy and personal power. And honestly, very interestingly, this reminds me of the history of the Protestant Reformation, which was the idea that one did not need the Catholic Church and priesthood to interpret the Bible. And with the invention of the printing press and translation of the Bible from Latin into common languages, individual citizens could now read the Bible for themselves, and they weren't reliant on tithing and attending the Catholic Church to learn the Word of God, which really to me boils down to this idea of like power to the people to interpret their own ideas. As Gabriela Herstik states in the description of this card in the Goddess of Love tarot deck, your erotic energy is yours and you are your own lover first and foremost. So let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today. And as I sort of distill the theme for today, I'm thinking about how can I honor my own pleasure and power? Where might I be giving away my power unnecessarily or allowing someone else to take choices from me? Alright, and today I'm pulling from the Sasoribito Tarot deck by Stasia Burrington, and I pulled the Three of Swords reverse. The Three of Swords is generally about heartbreak, pain, and sadness. It often depicts a heart or a person being stabbed 3 times, like often, again, literally in the heart, being stabbed in the back, hurt, feeling wronged. And this card carries feelings of great loneliness, suffering, rejection, betrayal, separation, and disappointment. It says you might feel lost and surprised by the pain. The Three of Swords can either represent a wrong being done to you or the possibility of hurting others. Are you hurt or do you wield the blades? But because I pulled this card in reverse, I'm thinking more about forgiveness, healing, understanding, and moving on. Again, as we think about the theme of the Emperor today, we think about how can I honor my own pleasure and power? Where might I be giving my power away? So for this card, thinking of, again, like where have you maybe given your sword to someone else and they stabbed you in the back? Where have you maybe allowed someone to take choices away from you um, and not sort of stood in your own power with your own needs and honoring your own pleasure? I think a lot about boundaries when it comes to this, or just things where you may have overextended yourself, or maybe been a little too like pushed through something that maybe wasn't a thing you needed. Maybe looking back, you shouldn't have pushed through that. And actually, right now, for me, this is that I've recorded 4 podcast episodes today, and I feel like my voice is giving out. So maybe 3 is my max, actually, without taking a break. So that's a little bit of how can I honor my own pleasure and power. Okay, stopping when I'm ahead instead of sort of pushing through to maybe my own pain or feeling like again, that I'm sort of pushing through something that I don't need to, or deciding that no, I have to do 4, and then when I get there, realizing, okay, maybe I'm not in my best form, maybe my voice is getting a little hoarse, and that kind of thing. All right, and then links for the tarot decks will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks again for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast will come out daily, Monday through Friday, for all of 2025. All right, see you soon. Bye bye.